It was a quiet, sunny afternoon in the suburban neighborhood of Oakwood Ridge. The kind of afternoon where the world seemed to slow down, where every bird chirped in perfect harmony, and every tree swayed in a gentle breeze. Alex stood in their front yard, trimming the roses that lined the pathway to the front door. The smell of fresh soil and blooming flowers filled the air, and the distant sound of children laughing added a touch of serenity to the peaceful setting. In the corner of the yard, their cat, Whiskers, lounged lazily in the sun. The calico's fur gleamed in the golden light as it rolled over on its back, paws twitching in a dreamlike state. Alex smiled at the sight, wiping the sweat from their brow. Whiskers had been with them for years now, a constant companion through thick and thin. She was more than just a pet, she was family. The kind of cat that would curl up at the foot of Alex's bed after a long day, offering comfort in her silent, gentle way. Alex's peace was broken by the sudden screeching of tires on gravel. Looking up, Alex saw a black SUV pull into the driveway next door. It was Karen, the notorious HOA officer of the neighborhood, the woman who prided herself on enforcing the most ridiculous rules with unrelenting authority. The woman who had caused more trouble in this neighborhood than anyone could remember, and yet, somehow, she held power over the lives of everyone living here. Karen stepped out of the car, her stern face already set into a scowl as she adjusted the oversized sunglasses on her nose. She wore a fitted black suit, clearly intended to command respect, though it only served to make her appear more obnoxious than authoritative. With each step she took toward Alex's yard, the tension in the air seemed to thicken. "Alex," Karen called in a clipped, formal tone, making her way over. "I need to have a word with you." Alex straightened up, setting the pruning shears down. "What's up, Karen?" They tried to sound casual, but the ever-present tension between them was palpable. "Your grass is too high," Karen snapped, glancing down at the small patch of grass in front of Alex's garden. "The HOA rules clearly state that it must be trimmed to exactly 2 inches. And your mailbox? It's leaning slightly to the right. I've already warned you about these things before." Alex blinked, taken aback. The grass wasn't long at all, barely even an inch beyond the standard length, and the mailbox had been leaning for a week or two, nothing that couldn't be fixed in a matter of minutes. It was the kind of thing you'd expect a neighbor to mention casually, not someone who acted like a military general overseeing a battalion of minor infractions. "Karen, really? This is what you're concerned about today? The grass? The mailbox?" Alex shook their head, frustration building. "There are worse things happening in this neighborhood than." "I'm not here to listen to excuses," Karen interrupted, cutting Alex off with a sharp, dismissive wave of her hand. "This is about following the rules. If you don't want to cooperate, I'll be forced to issue a fine." Alex opened their mouth, ready to argue, but was silenced by the sudden loud meow of Whiskers, who had trotted over to the edge of the yard. The cat meowed once more, rubbing against Alex's legs, seeking attention. Before Alex could kneel down to pet her, Karen's eyes narrowed, and she turned toward Whiskers with a look of pure disdain. "I hope that thing isn't getting into your plants," she said, stepping forward in an almost predatory manner. Whiskers, seemingly startled by Karen's tone, darted across the yard, running behind Alex's legs for cover. But Karen was already stepping forward, her gaze locked on the cat with a strange, cold intensity. "Karen, back off," Alex warned, instinctively stepping in front of their cat. But Karen wasn't backing down. Without hesitation, she reached for a concealed pistol strapped under her jacket. In one fluid motion, she pulled it out and fired a single shot at the unsuspecting cat. The sound of the gunshot rang through the still air, and Alex's heart skipped a beat. Whiskers collapsed instantly, her body twitching for a moment before lying still on the ground. Alex froze. The world felt like it had come to a complete halt. In the next few seconds, everything seemed to blur: Karen's cold, emotionless expression, the soft thud of Whiskers hitting the grass, and the sudden rush of blood pounding in Alex's ears. "Whiskers! Alex screamed, rushing to the lifeless body of their beloved cat. But Karen stood there, as if nothing had happened, as if this was all some minor inconvenience. She didn't apologize, didn't even flinch. Instead, she simply turned and walked back to her car, her voice cutting through the air one last time. "Make sure you trim that grass by tomorrow," she called, without a hint of remorse. Alex's breath came in short gasps as they knelt beside Whiskers, their hands shaking. "What the hell did you just do?" The answer came to them almost instantly. This wasn't just about grass or mailboxes. This was personal. And they weren't going to let it slide. Not this time. The world felt like it had shattered in an instant. Alex's hands trembled as they held Whiskers' limp body, the once vibrant life now still and cold in their arms. A sharp pain pierced through their chest, a mix of shock, disbelief, and pure, unadulterated grief. Alex could hardly breathe, their vision blurring with tears as they cradled their beloved cat in their lap, unwilling to accept what had just happened. Whiskers had always been more than just a pet. She was their companion, their confidant, the quiet presence that always knew when they needed comfort. From the moment they first adopted her, she had never left their side. Alex could still remember the day they picked her out at the animal shelter. The tiny kitten with patches of orange, brown, and white, her curious green eyes peering up at them with a silent trust that would grow into years of loyalty. "Come here, little one," Alex had whispered that day, coaxing her out from the corner. Whiskers had hesitated for only a moment before she padded across the room, jumping into Alex's arms as if she had known, even then, that they were meant to be together. The memories flooded in, one after another, Whiskers curled up beside them on cold, lonely nights, the soft purring that had soothed their darkest moments, the way she'd playfully swatted at a string or chased a feather across the floor. How many hours had they spent just sitting together, silently bonding, as if the world outside their home didn't exist? Alex looked down at the body in their hands, the cat's once soft fur now lifeless and cold. The sight of it sent a wave of nausea through their stomach. How could anyone, how could Karen, do this? How could she just end Whiskers' life so callously, without a second thought? A guttural sob escaped Alex's throat, the grief rising like a tidal wave, threatening to consume them. The tears were unstoppable now, streaming down their face as they whispered into Whiskers' fur. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, girl. I couldn't protect you." The sun, once a warm beacon of light in the yard, now seemed distant and cruel. The sounds of the neighborhood, the birds, the wind, the distant chatter, felt muffled, as if the world had somehow turned down its volume, leaving Alex alone in the thick silence of their sorrow. Every part of them wanted to run after Karen, to scream, to do something, anything, before they could even begin to process the unimaginable horror that had just taken place. But for the moment, all they could do was hold Whiskers close and cry. Time seemed to stand still as the grief settled into a heavy, suffocating weight. But in that heavy stillness, something else started to grow within Alex. Anger. A deep, burning anger. It wasn't just the loss of their cat that hurt, it was the betrayal. The utter injustice of it all. The fact that Karen had taken Whiskers' life without a shred of remorse, without any reason other than her twisted sense of power. Alex's grip on Whiskers tightened, their face hardening as the anger began to take hold. They couldn't let it go, not this time. They wouldn't. Karen had crossed a line. And Alex wasn't about to let her get away with it. It was just a week ago. Whiskers had been curled up in the corner of Alex's room, stretched out lazily as Alex worked at the desk, trying to finish up a project for work. Every now and then, Whiskers would bat at a stray pencil or leap up onto the desk, her presence always reminding Alex that there was more to life than work, more than the stress of the outside world. Whiskers had a way of making everything feel lighter, even during the most exhausting days. She had a knack for making Alex smile, no matter how dark the day had been. "Hey, you," Alex had whispered, rubbing Whiskers' soft belly as she purred contentedly. "You're the best thing about this place." The memory was so vivid, it felt like Whiskers was still there, lying by their side. A tear slipped down Alex's cheek. Why had Karen taken that away from them? Why had she, of all people, destroyed the one thing that brought them peace? The one thing that had kept them from feeling so alone in a world that often seemed indifferent? Alex stood up suddenly, their body shaking with the rush of adrenaline. They were done being passive. They were done feeling powerless. Karen's actions had gone too far, and now it was time to make her pay. The rage built like a storm inside Alex, dark clouds of fury and grief swirling together. It wasn't enough to just mourn the loss of Whiskers. No. They needed to do something about it. They needed to make sure Karen couldn't get away with it. Alex's mind raced with possibilities. They could go to the police, report the incident as a crime. But Alex knew that in a neighborhood like this, where Karen held the kind of power she did, the authorities would likely just brush it off. What would they say? That it was just a cat? That it wasn't worth their time? Alex's stomach twisted at the thought. No, Karen needed to face the consequences of her actions. She needs to suffer like I am, Alex thought bitterly. Alex paced back and forth across the yard, each step fueling their determination. The anger, though still raw and painful, now had a clear focus. Karen was going to be exposed for what she truly was. They couldn't let Whiskers' death be forgotten, swept under the rug like everything else Karen had done. They would confront Karen. Expose her cruelty to the whole neighborhood. The HOA rules didn't matter anymore. This wasn't about broken mailboxes or grass lengths. This was about justice. With one last glance at Whiskers' still form, Alex felt something deep inside them shift. It wasn't just a desire for vengeance, it was a need to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, to stand up against people like Karen who thought they could do whatever they wanted without consequence. Alex wiped their tears away, their face hardening as the first steps of their plan began to take shape. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And Karen was going to regret ever thinking she could get away with it. The next morning, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. Whiskers' death had left a hole in their heart, but it also left behind an unanswered question: why? Why had Karen done it? Alex had been replaying the events of yesterday over and over in their head, trying to make sense of it. Sure, Karen was cruel, everyone knew that, but killing a cat? That was something else entirely. It felt like there was more to this than just a simple act of rage. Something in Alex's gut told them that they needed to dig deeper. So, they set off early, armed with nothing but determination and the need for answers. Alex drove down the quiet streets of Oakwood Ridge, eyes scanning the neighborhood. They parked their car a few houses down from Karen's, careful to remain out of sight. The thought of walking up to Karen's front door felt too direct, too confrontational. No, Alex needed to observe first, gather information. They would find out everything they could, and then, when the time was right, they'd confront Karen with the truth. As they sat in the car, a sense of unease settled over them. The once peaceful neighborhood now felt suffocating. The wind had picked up, rustling the leaves of the nearby trees, and the early morning light seemed a little too dim, as though it were trying to hide something. Alex's gaze shifted to Karen's house, large, imposing, with an air of superiority that matched its owner. The house was dark, the curtains drawn tight. There was no sign of life, no movement at all. It was when Alex noticed the faint sound of a door creaking open that their heart began to race. A figure emerged from the shadows of the porch. It was Karen. She walked briskly to her car, holding a large, white bag in one hand. It was strange. The bag looked too bulky, too odd to be something ordinary. Was it a garbage bag? Alex's instincts screamed at them to follow, but they remained still, observing. Karen drove off without a glance toward Alex's car, leaving the street eerily quiet. Alex couldn't help but feel a chill crawl up their spine. What was in that bag? Could it be Whiskers? Without wasting a second, Alex stepped out of the car and began walking toward Karen's house. Their mind raced with possibilities. They had to know. The suspense gnawed at them, each step toward the house making their heart beat faster. As they neared the house, Alex slowed down, staying hidden behind a row of bushes that separated the front yard from the backyard. The large oak tree in the yard provided some cover, and Alex crouched low, peeking through the branches. Then, they heard it, a soft, rhythmic thud, followed by a faint sizzling sound. A strange noise, one that made Alex's stomach flip. It came from the back of the house. Alex's pulse quickened as they edged closer, moving as quietly as possible, trying to avoid any sound that might alert Karen to their presence. The sounds grew louder as Alex approached the back porch. They could now clearly hear a low hum, like a gas stove igniting, mixed with the occasional scrape of something metallic. Alex's heart raced in anticipation, each step bringing them closer to the source of the noise. And then, they saw it. Through a gap in the blinds, Alex's eyes widened as they took in the scene before them. Karen stood in her kitchen, back turned toward the window, a strange smirk on her face. On the counter, covered by a white cloth, was a large dish. Alex's stomach lurched as the unmistakable shape of what could only be Whisker's body became visible under the cloth. But it wasn't just that, no, it was worse. Karen was standing over it, carefully slicing into the body with a sharp knife. Alex's breath caught in their throat. What they were witnessing couldn't be real, couldn't be happening in their own neighborhood. Karen had crossed a line. But this? This was something far darker, far more twisted than Alex could have ever imagined. The sound of the knife against the body sent a shiver down Alex's spine, the sickening scrape echoing through the thin walls of the house. The smell of whatever was cooking, something metallic and foul, wafted through the crack in the blinds, making Alex gag. For a moment, Alex stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. Was this really happening? Was this truly the woman who had once been a neighbor, someone they'd casually passed by in the yard, exchanged pleasantries with at neighborhood events? The woman who, for all intents and purposes, had now revealed herself as a cold-blooded killer. Alex's mind spun with conflicting thoughts. They needed to leave, now. They needed to run and tell someone, anyone, about what they had just seen. But before they could even move, Karen turned sharply toward the window, her eyes meeting Alex's gaze through the crack in the blinds. Time seemed to freeze. For a brief, horrifying moment, neither of them moved. Karen's face went blank, her lips curling into a twisted, knowing smile. Alex's breath hitched in their throat as she stepped toward the window, her eyes never leaving theirs. Alex's heart pounded in their chest, every instinct screaming at them to flee, to hide. But they couldn't tear themselves away from the sight. Karen's expression was unreadable, her face cold as stone. She didn't seem shocked or surprised, she seemed amused, as if she'd been expecting someone to uncover her secret. The moment dragged on, the tension so thick Alex could almost taste it. But then, Karen turned away, her smirk still lingering on her lips, as though she had just won a game. She picked up the dish, carried it over to the stove, and began cooking, no hesitation, no remorse. The realization hit Alex like a ton of bricks. This was no ordinary act of cruelty. This was deliberate. Calculated. And Alex was now in deeper than they ever could have imagined. Alex's pulse was racing as they approached Karen's house, the weight of the truth they had uncovered pressing down on their chest. The world felt distant, muffled, as if they were moving in a haze. The image of Karen standing in her kitchen, slicing into Whisker's lifeless body, replayed in their mind over and over again. The haunting memory of Karen's smile, cold and knowing, had branded itself into Alex's memory. There was no going back now. Alex clenched their fists, trying to push back the nausea, the anger, the crushing sense of betrayal. They couldn't wait any longer. They couldn't let this go. This had to end now. As they reached the front door, Alex hesitated for a moment. A strange calm had settled over them, a steely determination that cut through the fog of emotion. With a deep breath, they knocked once, twice, each rap of their knuckles sounding louder than the last, as if calling forth the inevitable. It wasn't long before the door swung open, and there stood Karen, her lips curling into a thin, tight smile as if nothing in the world was out of the ordinary. Her eyes were hidden behind the ever-present dark sunglasses, but Alex could feel the weight of her gaze, even without seeing it. Well, if it isn't my favorite troublemaker," Karen said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "What can I do for you, Alex?" The word stung, but Alex didn't flinch. They stood tall, shoulders squared, their eyes locked on Karen's as they spoke through clenched teeth. "I know what you did," Alex said, their voice shaking with a mixture of fury and disgust. "I know what you did to Whiskers. And I won't let you get away with it." Karen raised an eyebrow, clearly unfazed. She crossed her arms over her chest, a posture of defiance. "Oh? And what exactly do you think you know, Alex?" she asked, her tone dismissive, almost amused. "You've been spying on me, haven't you? How pathetic." The casualness in Karen's voice made Alex's blood boil. How could she be so nonchalant? How could she stand there, so smug, after what she'd done? "You killed her," Alex spat, stepping forward, their voice rising. "You shot my cat, and then you—" Alex stopped short, the words feeling like they were getting caught in their throat. The image of Whiskers' body in the kitchen, lifeless and mutilated, was still fresh in their mind. "You cooked her," Alex finished, voice breaking with disgust. For the first time, Karen's expression shifted slightly. The smile faltered, but only for a moment. It was as if the mask she wore was slipping, revealing a cold, darker side that had always been lurking beneath the surface. "Is that what you think happened?" Karen asked, her voice suddenly soft, almost sympathetic. She stepped back from the door, motioning for Alex to come inside. "Why don't you come in, and I'll explain everything to you." Alex's instincts screamed at them to turn and walk away, to let the authorities handle it, but something in Karen's eyes, something twisted, made Alex push forward. "I don't need you to explain anything. I saw what you were doing, Karen," they said, their voice firm, despite the knot of fear tightening in their stomach. "I saw you in your kitchen. I saw the body. I saw you slicing it up." Karen chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the sound of a predator toying with its prey. "You saw what I wanted you to see," Karen said coldly. "But you have no idea what it all means." Alex's heart pounded as they stepped into the house, anger and dread mixing into a volatile combination. Karen motioned for Alex to sit at the small dining table in the center of the room, the faint smell of something cooked lingering in the air. Alex's eyes immediately flicked to the stove, where a large pot sat, covered with a lid. The sight made their stomach churn. "Don't act so high and mighty, Alex," Karen continued, her voice turning icy. "You think you know everything, but you don't. You think I killed that stupid cat out of some petty vengeance? You think I just—" She paused for a moment, a strange glint flickering in her eyes, "shot her for no reason?" Alex stood motionless, trying to keep their breathing steady. "You killed her because you're sick. You took her life for no reason," Alex said through gritted teeth. But Karen wasn't finished. She stepped toward the stove, pulling the lid off the pot with a flourish, revealing the contents inside. Alex felt the room spin as their eyes locked onto the mangled pieces of what was unmistakably their cat. Whiskers. Whiskers was in that pot. Alex's chest tightened, their breath coming in shallow gasps as the reality of the situation hit them like a tidal wave. The image of their beloved pet, once full of life, now reduced to a grotesque pile of meat, cooked for some twisted reason, made them feel as though the ground beneath them had vanished. Karen's smirk returned, dark and chilling. "You're so quick to judge, Alex. But you don't understand. You think I killed her for some petty reason. No, this is bigger than that. Much bigger. Alex's mind was racing, unable to process the sight in front of them. What the hell are you talking about? What could possibly justify this? They demanded, voice breaking with emotion. Karen's eyes glittered with a mix of amusement and something darker, something far more sinister. She leaned in closer, her voice low, almost a whisper. I didn't just kill your cat for no reason, Alex. I did it for the greater good. You wouldn't understand, but I'm going to show you. Alex recoiled, disgust crawling up their spine. Greater good? You're a monster, they whispered, the words hanging heavy in the air. Am I? Karen's voice was now dripping with condescension. What if I told you that your precious little cat wasn't as innocent as you think she was? What if I told you she was part of something much bigger, something dangerous? Alex froze. Their mind raced to process Karen's words. What are you talking about? What does Whiskers have to do with any of this? Karen's smile twisted even further, a malicious glint in her eye. You'll see soon enough, Alex. You just need to open your eyes. The truth is waiting for you, but you'll have to look beyond the obvious. Alex felt a cold chill creep down their spine. The weight of the situation was too much to bear. It wasn't just about Whiskers anymore, it was about something far more sinister, something Alex had yet to uncover. And Karen, with all her twisted logic and psychotic behavior, was the key to unraveling it all. But at that moment, all Alex could focus on was the chilling sight in front of them, Whiskers, cooked and tainted beyond recognition, and the monster who had done it all. You're insane, Alex whispered, their voice hoarse from the rising bile in their throat. Karen's smile only deepened. You'll understand soon enough. You'll have no choice but to accept it. Alex turned away, disgusted, every instinct telling them to run. They didn't know how much more they could take of this madness, but they knew one thing for certain: Karen wasn't just some petty HOA officer anymore. She was something far darker, and Alex had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went. The drive home felt like a blur. Every mile, every turn, every stoplight seemed to stretch on endlessly as Alex tried to process the confrontation with Karen. The image of Whiskers in that pot, the grotesque reality of what Karen had done, kept flashing in their mind. It made Alex's stomach turn with every thought, but it also fueled something darker inside them. A fire. A need for retribution. Karen hadn't just killed their cat, she'd torn apart something precious. She needed to pay for what she'd done. As the front door of their house slammed behind them, Alex stood still for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on their chest. They knew they couldn't just let it go. The authorities? They'd never believe them. The neighborhood would likely side with Karen, the powerful HOA officer, before Alex could even say a word. No, this had to be done differently. If Alex wanted justice, they would have to take matters into their own hands. Alex moved quickly through the house, grabbing their laptop and pulling up a fresh document. They needed a plan. A way to expose Karen's darkness to the world, to show everyone what she was capable of. They couldn't just walk into another confrontation without something solid, something irrefutable. They needed to gather evidence. The next few days became a blur of late nights and early mornings. Alex's mind never stopped turning, always strategizing, always finding ways to get closer to the truth. They started small, paying attention to Karen's habits, noting down the times she came and went, and trying to figure out her patterns. Alex had spent enough time in the neighborhood to know her routine, but now it was different. Now, they were looking for the cracks in her perfect facade, the things she might not be careful about. The first piece of evidence came unexpectedly. Alex had been keeping an eye on Karen's house from their car, parked several blocks away, when they saw something strange. Karen had just finished unloading a set of cardboard boxes from her trunk, boxes that, judging by their size, looked far too large to contain anything ordinary. Alex's pulse quickened as Karen disappeared into the house, leaving the boxes unattended in the driveway. This was their chance. Alex had always been good at blending into the background, and today was no different. They slipped out of their car and casually walked past Karen's house, pretending to mind their own business. With the speed of someone used to sneaking around, Alex grabbed one of the boxes and tucked it under their arm, making sure to act as inconspicuous as possible. Once they were back in the safety of their car, they opened the box. The contents sent a chill down their spine. Inside was a stack of old photographs, dozens of them, of people Alex had never seen before. But the one thing that stood out was the dates stamped on the back of each photo: 2015, 2016, 2017. It seemed like Karen had been collecting pictures of people from the neighborhood for years. But why? The photos weren't the only things inside the box. There were several old, faded documents, the words on them blurred and barely readable. Alex quickly scanned through them. Contracts. Legal papers. And at the bottom of the box, a police report. It wasn't addressed to Karen, but to someone named Eleanor Watkins. Alex's stomach dropped. The report was from a missing person case, a woman who had gone missing in 2015. It was clear that Karen had been involved in something far darker than just enforcing petty HOA rules. Alex's hands shook as they closed the box and slipped it back into the car. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and they realized Karen had been hiding something far more sinister than anyone could imagine. This wasn't just about power, this was about control. This was about victims. The next day, Alex drove to the local police station under the guise of reporting a suspicious incident. They had a plan: get a copy of the police report from the missing person case, find out more about Karen's connections, and then put everything together in a way that no one could ignore. But they had to be careful. If Karen caught wind of what Alex was doing, it could be disastrous. Alex waited until the evening, when most of the officers were off shift, and slipped into the police station with practiced ease. They approached the front desk and asked for a copy of the report for Eleanor Watkins, citing vague neighborhood concerns as their reason for requesting it. The receptionist looked at Alex, then glanced at the computer screen. After a few moments, she printed out a copy and handed it over, no questions asked. As Alex left the station, they couldn't help but feel the weight of what they were doing. This wasn't just about exposing Karen anymore, it was about unveiling the truth. And the more Alex uncovered, the more they realized how deep this ran. Karen was connected to something far darker than they could have imagined. That night, Alex sat in front of their laptop, the documents from the box spread out in front of them. They had photos, police reports, and legal papers, but it still wasn't enough. There was one more thing they needed: a direct connection between Karen and the missing person case. They needed someone who knew the truth. Someone who had been close to Karen. Someone who could provide the missing link. The opportunity came when Alex ran into Marcus, a former neighbor who had lived across the street from Karen for years. Alex had never spoken to Marcus much, but they knew he had worked closely with Karen during HOA meetings. He had always seemed a little too quiet, too distant, like he knew more than he let on. The conversation started casually, with Alex asking about the neighborhood and how things had been. But slowly, Alex steered the conversation toward Karen, mentioning how strange her behavior had been recently. Marcus hesitated at first, but after a few drinks, his guard began to lower. "Yeah, Karen's not who she says she is," Marcus said, his voice low and cautious. "I've seen things, heard things. Things that don't sit right with me. I don't know if I should be talking about it, but, if you want to know the truth, Karen's involved in a lot more than just HOA stuff. She's got ties to other people. Dangerous people." Alex leaned forward, eyes wide with shock. "What kind of people?" "People who disappear," Marcus muttered. "And Karen? She's not just an HOA officer. She's a part of something bigger. Something way bigger than this stupid neighborhood. I'm not sure if I can help you, but I'll tell you this, she's the one who makes the calls. If people go missing, it's because Karen had something to do with it." Alex's stomach churned, but they nodded. "You've helped enough, Marcus. I'll take it from here." The plan was coming together. The evidence was irrefutable. Alex had the photos, the police reports, Marcus's testimony, and the box of documents that connected Karen to a world of darkness. All they needed now was to expose Karen's twisted secrets and put an end to her reign of terror once and for all. As Alex prepared for the final confrontation, they felt a sense of resolve settle over them. This wasn't just about vengeance for Whiskers anymore, it was about stopping Karen before she hurt anyone else. It was about taking down the monster who had been hiding in plain sight, pretending to be just another HOA officer. And this time, Alex wouldn't be backing down. The HOA meeting was packed. The usual hum of chatter filled the air, as neighbors gathered to discuss everything from grass length to mailbox positions. It was the same routine, the same group of people arguing over trivialities while Karen presided over them like a queen. But tonight was different. Tonight, Alex had a different agenda. This wouldn't be another petty meeting about rules. Tonight, Karen would be exposed for what she truly was. Alex stood at the back of the crowded room, watching as Karen stood at the front, her usual smug expression plastered on her face as she called the meeting to order. She hadn't yet noticed Alex's presence, but that would change soon enough. Alex's heart pounded as they steadied their breath. This was it. The moment they had been preparing for, the moment when the truth would finally be laid bare for everyone to see. "Let's begin," Karen said, her voice sharp as she adjusted the mic. "We have a lot to discuss tonight. Actually, we have something much more important to discuss," Alex interrupted, their voice loud enough to cut through the room. The chatter faded as the room turned toward Alex. Karen's face immediately darkened, her eyes narrowing behind her sunglasses. Alex walked to the front, feeling the weight of all the eyes on them. They stood tall, shoulders back, as they faced the crowd. "What I'm about to show you is something that's been hidden right under your noses for years. We've all been living in a community that, on the surface, seems perfect. But there's something far more sinister lurking behind it all." A few people exchanged confused glances, but Alex didn't falter. They reached into their bag and pulled out the stack of photos, documents, and the police report, everything they had gathered over the past week. They slammed it down onto the table in front of Karen. "Karen has been hiding something from all of you," Alex continued, their voice steady but firm. "She's not just some HOA officer enforcing rules. She's a part of something much darker. Something none of you would believe if I didn't show you the proof." Karen took a step forward, her face now a mask of anger. "Alex, you have no idea what you're talking about. You're making accusations without any proof." Alex didn't let Karen finish. They picked up the first photo, a picture of a woman from the missing person case, the one who had disappeared in 2015. Alex held it up for everyone to see. "This is Eleanor Watkins. She was reported missing in 2015. And do you know who was involved in her disappearance?" Alex's eyes locked onto Karen's. "Karen." A collective gasp rippled through the room. The murmurs of disbelief grew louder, but Alex pressed on. "I've seen the evidence, Karen. I've seen the photos, the documents, the police report. I know you're involved in things you can't hide anymore." Alex's voice was gaining strength with each word. "These aren't just coincidences. These aren't just old files you've forgotten about. This is a pattern of people disappearing, people being silenced, and it all ties back to you." Karen's face paled slightly, but she quickly regained her composure, trying to play it off. "This is ridiculous. You're just making things up, Alex. You've got nothing." Alex smirked, holding up the next piece of evidence, the police report. They opened it to the page that detailed the last known contact with Eleanor Watkins. "This report ties you directly to the case. The evidence is clear. You may have thought you could cover it up, but it's all here, Karen. And I'm not the only one who knows." The room was dead silent now. No one dared to speak, their eyes fixed on Alex and the incriminating evidence laid out before them. Karen's breathing was shallow, her composure beginning to crack. She glanced nervously around the room, sensing the shift in the crowd. The community, once loyal to her, was now unsure, hesitant. They had trusted her, believed her to be the authority on all matters, but now that trust was shattering. Alex stood tall, their gaze never leaving Karen's. "And it's not just Eleanor," they said, flipping through the documents. "You've been taking people from this neighborhood, manipulating and controlling them. You've used your position to hide the truth, and I'm not going to let you get away with it anymore." Karen's mouth opened as if she were going to speak, but the words faltered. The once confident, authoritative woman now appeared small, her eyes flickering from Alex to the crowd. She took a hesitant step back, and Alex seized the opportunity. "This isn't just about a missing person or some lost cat," Alex continued, their voice now rising with passion. "This is about the lives you've ruined, the lives you've taken. You've manipulated everyone in this neighborhood, controlled them with fear and lies. Well, tonight, Karen, the truth is coming out." The room was still. The people who had once feared Karen were now looking at her with distrust, some of them even stepping back. The realization was hitting them all at once: their so-called leader, the person they had followed without question, was a monster. A cold-blooded manipulator who had used her position to terrorize her own neighbors. Karen took another step back, her face drained of color. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but nothing came out. The dam had broken. Her secrets were out, and there was no turning back. "You're not the powerful person you think you are," Alex said, their voice calm now, steady with the weight of truth. "You're just a coward, hiding behind rules and lies. But the truth always comes out. And tonight, Karen, it's come for you." The room seemed to breathe a collective sigh, the tension lifting as the crowd began to murmur amongst themselves. Some were shaking their heads in disbelief, others were in tears, finally seeing the truth for what it was. But there was no denying it anymore: Karen's reign was over. And as Alex stood there, their heart pounding with adrenaline, they knew this was only the beginning. The battle wasn't over yet, but for the first time in a long while, Alex felt something they hadn't felt in years: hope. Hope that, for once, justice would prevail. The police station was buzzing with activity when Alex walked in, their heart pounding in their chest. The weight of the past few days had left them drained, but there was no turning back now. The evidence they had gathered, the truth they had exposed, had led to this moment: Karen's arrest. Alex had spent the past 2 days coordinating with the police, sharing the information, the photographs, the documents, and the police reports. The authorities had been hesitant at first, unsure if the case was as serious as Alex made it out to be. But after seeing the undeniable proof, they couldn't ignore it any longer. The investigation had been launched, and soon, Karen's dark secrets would be unraveled. Inside the station, Alex took a deep breath, glancing over at the officers who had been working on the case. The buzz of conversation and clinking of phones seemed distant, and Alex felt a strange sense of calm amidst the chaos. They had done what they could. The ball was now in the hands of the justice system. A few hours later, Alex found themselves sitting in a courtroom. The air was thick with tension, and the murmur of the crowd faded as the judge entered. Alex's eyes shifted toward the front, where Karen sat, her hands folded in front of her, her eyes hard as stone, her usual arrogance now replaced with cold calculation. Karen had been arrested, of course, but her defense was as twisted as Alex had imagined. Her lawyer argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that the missing persons cases were unrelated, that Whisker's death had been an accident, a result of some unknown event that Alex had misinterpreted. The lawyer even went so far as to paint Alex as a disgruntled neighbor, someone seeking revenge for petty grievances. Alex clenched their jaw, the words cutting through them like knives. But the proof was undeniable. The documents, the photos, the testimony from Marcus, it was all there. There was no denying what Karen had done, and the witnesses who had come forward, terrified but resolute, only strengthened the case against her. As the trial drew to a close, the jury deliberated. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Alex sat in the front row, their heart heavy with anticipation. They had done everything they could to make sure Karen faced the consequences of her actions, but it was now up to the jury to decide her fate. Minutes turned into hours, and the waiting was unbearable. Finally, the jury returned. The room fell silent as the foreman stood up, holding the verdict in his hand. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Karen Carter, guilty on all counts." The words echoed in the room, and a wave of relief washed over Alex. It wasn't just a victory for them, it was a victory for Whiskers, for everyone who had been manipulated and harmed by Karen's cruelty. The weight of the past few days seemed to lift, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Alex allowed themselves to exhale. Karen's twisted defense had failed. She had been sentenced to life in prison for her crimes. But as Alex walked out of the courtroom, they couldn't help but feel a lingering emptiness. Yes, Karen was behind bars. Yes, justice had been served. But the pain of losing Whiskers, the cruelty of what had happened, still haunted Alex. It wasn't something that could be erased with a conviction. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street. Alex paused for a moment, looking up at the sky. There was a strange sense of finality in the air, but it wasn't just the end of Karen's reign. It was the end of an era for Alex, too. The neighborhood, once full of life and light, had been darkened by Karen's manipulation. But now, as the evening sky turned a deep shade of purple, Alex felt a faint sense of peace. As they walked toward their car, Alex's phone buzzed. It was a message from Marcus, one of the few people who had stood by Alex through all of this. The message was short, but it carried the weight of the moment. "You did it. Whiskers would be proud." Alex paused for a moment, reading the message. They felt a tightness in their chest, a reminder of everything they had lost. But Marcus was right. Whiskers was gone, but Alex had made sure her death wasn't in vain. They had brought Karen to justice. And in that small victory, there was peace. But as they drove away from the courthouse, Alex knew one thing for sure: the scars from this journey would never fully heal. The world was a darker place because of people like Karen. But there was hope. Hope that the truth would always find a way to surface, no matter how deep the lies were buried. And for Alex, that was enough. For now. The sun had barely begun to set as Alex stood in the small yard behind their house, the last remnants of daylight casting long shadows across the ground. The cool breeze stirred the leaves of the old oak tree, but it did little to ease the weight that still hung over Alex's heart. The trial was over. Karen was behind bars. Justice had been served. But the pain, grief that Alex hadn't yet fully processed, lingered in the corners of their mind like an uninvited guest. In front of them stood a small, young tree, freshly planted. It wasn't much yet, just a fragile sapling with pale green leaves, but it represented something far bigger than its size. It was for Whiskers, the cat who had been more than just a pet. Whiskers had been a companion, a symbol of peace, and a reminder of the simple joys that life could offer. The ceremony had been small, just Alex standing alone by the tree, the quiet whispers of nature surrounding them. There was no fanfare, no need for anything grand. Just a moment of reflection. A moment to say goodbye. Alex kneeled beside the sapling, their fingers brushing the dirt as they pressed it firmly around the roots. The earth felt cold, but in some strange way, it brought a sense of comfort. The weight of the loss was still there, undeniable, but something about the tree, something about the act of planting it, felt like a first step toward healing. Towards closure. "I promise," Alex whispered, a tear slipping down their cheek as they traced the rough bark of the tree with their fingers. "I won't forget you, Whiskers. Not ever." The tree was more than just a memorial for the cat they'd lost. It was a symbol of resilience. Life had a way of pushing people down, breaking them, testing them. But just like this tree, Alex would grow. They had fought for justice, not only for Whiskers, but for themselves. They had faced the darkness, confronted the monster that had lurked within their own neighborhood, and come out stronger. They stood up, wiping their hands on their jeans, taking one last look at the tree. It wasn't a perfect tree. It wasn't the biggest, the strongest, or the most impressive. But it had roots, it had a purpose, and it had the potential to grow. Just like Alex. The next few days felt strangely still, as if the world had slowed down to match Alex's inner calm. There was no more rushing to gather evidence, no more sleepless nights wondering how to expose the truth. No more running in fear of what Karen might do next. Everything had changed, and while it wasn't perfect, it was a new chapter. Neighbors had stopped by, one by one, offering quiet apologies, their faces marked with a mixture of guilt and admiration. Some had been too afraid to speak up when Karen had been in power. Some had known something wasn't right but had turned a blind eye. But now, in the aftermath, there was nothing left to hide. They saw Alex differently now, not just as a neighbor, but as someone who had fought for what was right, who had taken down the darkness that had haunted their lives. As Alex sat on the porch one evening, watching the tree sway gently in the wind, they realized that the pain of losing Whiskers would never fully disappear. But that wasn't the point. Grief wasn't something to conquer or erase, it was something to grow with. Just like the tree, Alex would continue to grow, step by step, through the heartache, through the healing. They knew that the memory of Whiskers, and the fight they had won for her, would remain with them forever. It would be woven into every new chapter, every new beginning. "Rest in peace, Whiskers," Alex whispered into the evening air. "You'll always be here with me." The wind picked up once more, rustling the leaves of the tree, as if answering in its own quiet way. Alex smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of connection with the world around them. It wasn't just about the fight. It was about finding peace in the aftermath. It was about knowing that, in the end, justice had been served, and the light of truth had pierced through the darkness. Alex stood, taking one last look at the tree before heading inside, their heart lighter than it had been in days. The journey wasn't over, but for now, they could rest. They could heal. And in that moment, that was enough.